My name's Barry James. I'm Chairman and Curator of the Midland Air Museum based at Coventry Airport. To my right is a propeller of an RE-8, which was built, or the propeller and the aircraft were built at Parkside by Armstrong Siddeley in the First World War in about 1917-18. So there's a very local connection with this. This propeller would have been fitted to the aircraft, which would then been disassembled and taken to Radford Aerodrome, not far from here, and flown off to operational squadrons. But Armstrong Siddeley during the entire First World War involved building thousands of these types of aircraft and other aircraft, including the Sopwith Pup, for use by the Royal Flying Corps as it then was, and became the Royal Air Force in 1918. To my left is the wing of a Meteor F1 aircraft that was used in the Second World War. One of the key things people do not realise that jets went operational with the RAF in 1944, and this wing to my left was part of an aircraft, as I said previously, called the Meteor. We use it at the museum simply to show instruction of how the wings are built. But the Meteor it came off was one of the very early, in fact the 14th Meteor F1 built during the Second World War. And it was very important. In fact, we did have actually one of our members who flew these aircraft during the Second World War, and he said it was a wonderful aircraft to fly. And we all know which engines would have powered these things, designed and developed by Sir Frank Whittle. To my left is the tailplane of an F-86 Sabre, built by the Americans, North America. It was a very successful aircraft. It was one of the very first operational jet fighters to fight in a combat situation, and that was basically in the Korean War. This particular one was part of a Canadian squadron, and the markings you can see to my left. The figure on the very top is the squadron marking itself. But the most important thing about the Sabre, the RAF used them as well in the early 50s because we were so short of developing our Hunter aircraft because they had technical problems to start with. So the RAF were given these by the mutual aid program. The Americans gave us them on loan effectively, and we used them in Germany and in this country to man our fighter squadrons. The engine you see here is called the Armstrong Siddeley Mamba. It was built in Coventry. It was fairly successful as an engine and was used on an aircraft built locally by Armstrong Whitworth called the Apollo airliner. The airliner was developed, but unfortunately it lost out to the Vickers Viscount, which then became a very successful aircraft in its own right, and we actually have one at the museum as it is. There are no Apollos left, only 2 were actually built. So the engine, although successful in many ways, was a little bit underpowered. In fact, it grew into an engine called the Double Mamba, which was 2 of these put together, and they powered an aircraft called the Fairy Gannet, which was used by the Royal Navy off aircraft carriers right up until the late 70s. To my right is the wheel of a Mosquito, de Havilland Mosquito, built during the Second World War, very successful fighter bomber used by the RAF and other countries. One of the key things about the aircraft, it was built of wood, because we were short of materials at that time and wood, and we had a lot of carpenters in this country, skilled carpenters. So them skills were turned over to making this aircraft, which was very fast and very successful. They were actually built in Coventry as well by the Standard Car Company at Canley, and they built 1,066 of these. But the aircraft itself would have been built at standard, but unfortunately they didn't have a runway or airfield in that area. So they'd been roaded on the back of trucks over to Anstey, not far from Coventry, where they'd been flown off on the short runway to be delivered to the RAF for operational squadrons. The engine to my right is the Rolls-Royce Spayer, a very successful engine used by the RAF and around the world. This particular engine was used to power an aircraft called the Phantom, McDonnell Douglas Phantom, an American-designed aircraft that was originally fitted with J-79 engines. When the RAF acquired the aircraft in the late 60s, because we wanted to put British engineering and components into it, we decided to re-engine the aircraft with 2 of these engines that would take the Phantom into roughly about 1,500 miles an hour. The only challenge, although the Spayer was a very successful engine and consumption of fuel was far less than the J-79, plus it wasn't smoky, which the early J-79s were. The problem is, in designing the aircraft to take these are wider than the J-79, so it made the aircraft wider, therefore more bulky. Their airflow was different. What that meant was some of the savings they had in fuel were lost in the sheer bulk and drag of the aircraft itself. So it was an example of putting British engineering, a very successful engine, unfortunately into an aircraft that was designed for a very different type of engine. But the Spayer itself was very successful as an engine, and the Phantom with the RAF was very successful. It was also fitted in the Buccaneer, which was again a very successful British designed aircraft and carried on until the early 90s with the RAF and designed originally for the Royal Navy. The Midland Air Museum was originally formed as the Midland Aircraft Preservation Society. It is made up largely of volunteers who restore, work, cut grass, the whole spectrum of things you do in a voluntary organisation. Although it has developed itself into an accredited museum, we have approximately about 60 plus aircraft in the region of nearly 200 engines, many artefacts, just like many other organisations. The museum is located at Coventry Airport on Rowley Road. We're open 7 days a week. We only close Christmas Day and Boxing Day and have done since 1990.